Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is with public officials, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Well, today our topic is going to be the proposed Bedford dog park, something that has been a labor of love for Bedford dog owners for several years. Focus of lots of work by dedicated volunteers, and the subject of more town council meetings than probably everybody involved would like to remember. Now, a lot of people might think that getting a dog park in town would be a relatively simple thing. It turns out that it's been a pretty complicated process that has taken years, literally, to wade through, has involved lots of obstacles and skirmishes, has been the subject of more than a few heated debates, and has frustrated untold numbers of Bedford residents who see a dog park as something that offers a benefit to the town and an amenity to the town that is every bit as desirable as other recreational opportunities that we have here in Bedford. Is there ever going to be a dog park? Well, we'll soon be a step closer to finding out in a few weeks. Last night, at the February 6th meeting of the Bedford Town Council, it was decided that voters can weigh in on the issue at the March 12th town election. Now you can see that I have two guests here today. Jessie Levine, who by now should be familiar to you all as our new town manager. And to my right is Fred Hurwitz. I pronounced that correctly, Fred?
You did.
All right, good. I try to do the names right. And Fred has been involved in this issue for quite a while, first as one of the members of the subcommittee that the town council set up to kind of study and get going the whole issue of dog park. And now he's president of the nonprofit group known as Friends of Canine Corner, who will be the group to kind of bring this whole thing to fruition, and will have a lot of responsibility in the future for the dog park. So what's going to happen through this show is we'll kind of do a walk-through history on the dog park efforts, some of the issues that have surrounded it, and what will need to be addressed if the whole thing is going to go forward. Our town manager, Jessie, came in at the tail end of the issue, if you'll forgive the pun, and she'll discuss the town's concerns about a dog park, and obviously there are concerns. Fred, who, as I said, served on the subcommittee and now, of course, is continuing to work on it with the nonprofit group, is really going to give us a history of what has gone on during this multi-year quest and what needs to happen in the future for it all to happen. And both of them, I think, in the course of the show will tell you what you, as a voter, need to understand about the dog park before you go in to vote on March 12th, because that vote will be important and will have much to do with what we see happen, whether there'll be a dog park or not in a few months in Bedford. So, having said all that,
when do we arm wrestle?
Well, you know, just in case, because we know there's at least one bone of contention. And under the table here, I did bring a few towels in case things get bloody, because we don't stop. You know, as you know, we just forge on ahead no matter what happens during taping.
Right.
So I mean, if it gets, you know, if it gets combative, we're
I
just going to wipe you off and say, keep talking, please.
Hopefully I'm smart enough I would not take on Jessie.
No.
No.
Well, she's tough, you know.
I know.
No, she doesn't put up with any baloney from anybody. She knows how to get in there and mix it up if she has to. So, I don't know. I'm not sure which of you want to open first, but it would kind of seem, because, I mean, this is an issue that I know I did a show on. Gosh, it's a year ago this past August that I did a show with Norm, because he has been active in this as the town council member, Norm Longville, and that actually, for those of you who might have missed that show, it is on YouTube. It is on the Tell It Like It Is website, and you might enjoy it. It'll give you all the background, and plus there's a little bit of it that's kind of funny in the beginning. But again, you don't have to, but just if you want to do the background. But in any event, I mean, a lot of time has gone by, so people do forget. And even though it's been on town council meetings, not everybody in the world watches town council meetings, and some of us fall asleep halfway through them if we're watching at home. So, I don't know, you think the best thing to do maybe, because you've been around way longer than Jessie on the kind of planning part of it. Do you want to do a history? And
you win the coin toss, Fred.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's fine.
yeah,
That's
and
fine.
you know,
Yeah.
we can hit on some of the controversies that went on during that whole time period that brings us all the way up to today.
Okay.
That
I'd
work?
be glad to do that.
Okay.
So I got involved about, I think, 3.5 years ago. The issues, as I understand them, start before that. I was not involved, so I'm only hearing it from other people.
Right.
But about 5 years ago, the town council created a new leash law in town. And people used to use some of the parks, in particular Benedictine Park, for allowing their dogs to get exercise and socialize with other dogs.
About that.
There was
dog
and that's what I am told. There was a lot of concern raised by people who were dog owners about where are we going to do this with our dogs. So my understanding is the town council at that time said that they would look into this. Several number of months later, they appointed a subcommittee. It was requested by the town council. It was part of Parks and Recreation. I was not part of it at that point in time. They went through an evaluation of a number of sites, did a fair amount of work. We have the notes and minutes from
there were at least
their
a
work.
half dozen, weren't there?
There were about a half dozen formally, and a number of others that were dismissed.
Never reached beyond the conversation stage.
Exactly, that's right. So I got involved about 3.5 years ago. We were being reinvigorated at that point in time, I think is the right word. The town council asked what's happening. Nothing was happening. The committee had fallen apart because they just couldn't get past solving all the issues related to the land. So this got reinvigorated. That's when I got involved. Over the course of time, I became chairman of that committee. We reviewed the previous work, revalidated the findings that they had. There were some that we went back, like there was some land adjoining CastleHill Farm that we looked at, and we ended up, long and the short of it, identifying this property that was owned by the town already, that you mentioned, off of Nashua Road. There were, at that point in time, we presented back to the town council. And asked us to take on some additional chores, which we agreed to do, including, challenging us, which is the way I put it. It's not the way they put it, but I put it as they challenge us to find a way to build a dog park without cost to the town. We agreed. This is tough economic times, and we really felt from the feedback we were getting from the community that we could do that, and so we thought that was a good thing to do for the community. So we accepted that. Challenge. They also asked us to then propose a design, which we eventually did. We came up with a design which includes fencing and what kind of fencing, using grass, what kind of grass, what kind of water fountain should be available, benches, etc. The parking in particular, yes. So we investigated, came back with some recommendations, had a fair amount of work, drawings done, etc. Town asked us to then work with some of the residents that were closest. The closest resident is several hundred feet away, and actually on the other side of a 59-foot hill.
Pinecrest.
Yes, that's right, Pinecrest Road. Yeah, that's right. And people there were understandably concerned about it.
Well, some of them went beyond concern. Some of them kind of got combative.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But again, as I mentioned to you before we started, that they're neighbors. I'm going to run into them in the grocery store, and so they had concerns. We try to be respectful of their concerns. We had a.
Can we just? I'll interrupt you for a second. If I remember, my memory serves me correctly. I mean, other than the fact that they weren't thrilled about a dog park being down the hill. Of course, for those of you who aren't familiar with the area, we'll just bring you up to speed. When you go by Riley Park and continue on down Nashua Road, heading toward 101, we're talking that wooded area that literally is wooded, that starts at Nashua and then just continues to go upward. It's all wooded. The baseball field and the engineering firm is right across the street.
That's correct.
And Pinecrest is up at the top of the hill, a portion of it beyond those trees and such. Other than the fact that some of the neighbors, weren't thrilled that down the hill there would be a dog park, the issues that they most kind of raised noise about was that they were very concerned that they would have noise affecting them and their
That was the
homes
most
and
common
neighborhoods.
concern.
That was the big one.
Yeah.
And just so that people know, and you can get detail or not, it doesn't matter, I suppose, at this point. But a lot of, there were kind of unofficial noise studies done. But then to verify really what the decibel level was and what decibel level would be heard by those folks and so on, there were professional studies done, and various things were done to mitigate some of the neighbors' concerns, to the point where a couple of the neighbors actually wound up on that revived subcommittee,
That's
if
correct.
I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yes.
So that everybody could kind of be peaceable and
That's correct.
solve the problems.
That's correct.
Okay, now
Yes.
I think that was the major one. Were there other issues besides the noise? It
That
seems
was
to
real-
me
that-
that was the big
That
one.
was
That
the
was a big
major
one.
one,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, it was the
Okay.
noise.
And
That's
I'm
correct.
sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
that's
your
okay.
flow, but just so people will kind of, know the whole history of it and know
that's
that in the end, the neighbors, I think, were reasonably satisfied with the planning from that point on to address their concerns.
I think that's fair. I mean, also to be fair to their representation, I think that many of them, or not, I shouldn't say many, some of them would simply say, I'd rather not be a dog park, no matter what you do. But,
Well, I found that kind of funny because I think at the time that I did the show,
yes,
I had kind of done a little study of the neighborhood.
yes,
Forgive me if I give the wrong numbers, but there were 27 residences and 23 dogs.
that's correct.
Which I
Yeah.
thought was kind of funny
That's
that all
correct.
these dog owners were kind of like complaining so
correct.
much about a dog park.
That's correct. I don't want to make too big a point of it, but
but I wanna get you on
but
the
I,
spot,
but
at
I
least
have,
once,
I have walked down that street,
Yes.
and the
a
dog
lot of
barking.
dogs.
The dog barking there was actually we actually brought dogs to the proposed dog park and
Yeah.
induced them to
Yeah.
bark and
Yeah.
tested the sound, and that was much lower than the
the
dog
dogs
barking
who
I heard
lived
when
there.
when I just walked on the street.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
well,
Well, let me just add this to the subject of the neighborhood, and that is that if the voters, and I know we haven't even gotten to what the questions are on the
Right,
ballot,
right.
but if the voters approved having the dog park
Mm-hmm.
and approved proceeding, we would, as use of town land, we would have the process go through the planning board process
Right.
as required
Right.
by state statute.
Right, good point to make,
And,
yeah.
and that includes a notification, and it provides a public input process. It's not necessarily binding on the project, but we would try to hear everybody's concerns and address
Yeah, I'm
them
glad
if it
you
got
brought
to
that
that
up.
point. So
Yeah.
just it's
Yeah.
not over. The conversation with the public and with the abutters isn't over.
and my promise to the members, the people who lived on that street, was for my participation, we don't consider it over. We will consider it a live issue that needs to be continually addressed if necessary.
Right.
But at any rate, the study did say a couple of things. It
Yes.
did say the very best buffer is a hill. Well, we have the hill.
And you got
The
the
next
trees.
best buffer is a foliated area, and we have
yeah.
pretty well foliated area.
Hundreds of trees.
Yes, and the third. So they said those two things are already there. The next item they suggested was a set of dense trees that lined it, which we had originally envisioned
That line right around the park.
on that side towards that street. He made a different recommendation than us, which was fine. He had said we had thought it would be right near the park, and he actually thought it might be better slightly up the hill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that'd actually be
Sense.
better. But
Yeah, but I know you had folks that planned that anyway to provide shade for both the animals and the human owners.
we had that in the plans and in
Yeah,
the cost
yeah, I know
estimates.
that,
That's
yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. So moving further on, we did get to the point where we thought we had dealt with all the concerns and objections, got to reported back to the town council, and there seemed to be a different understanding of the history. Some people thought this was a private organization coming forward to request use of town land to form
Now,
a dog
was
park.
that due to the fact that a couple of council members had changed, or just
I'm
memory
sure
losses, or-
that contributed. I'm sure that contributed. I really not quite clear why exactly, but there was that difference in point of view that this was a private organization. I don't understand it because it was a town committee.
Yeah,
It was a town committee. I never solicited the town. I'll speak for myself. I never solicited the town. So for me, it was always obviously a town park being asked for citizens to help contribute to. But anyway, however we got there, the town at that point in time was, so we're talking a few months ago, was at the point of saying, gee, we really would like this to be run and operated by an independent organization.
Right.
And the group felt like that was just more than we were willing to take on.
Well, back though a couple of years ago, right around the time I interviewed Norm, at that point in time there was a nonprofit organization being set up, but the kind of the primary purpose of that, and that I think you joined that right away.
Yes.
If my memory serves me, the primary purpose of that would be two things: fundraising, to obviously help the to pay for the park to be built, and then some charges that would go on into the future. And the other portion of it, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, would have to do with the volunteer involvement after the park opens,
Exactly.
such
That's
as
exactly
maintenance
correct.
and cleanup.
That's
and
exactly correct.
Improvements and those kinds
That's
of things.
exactly correct. Now, I should just add that the nonprofit was actually set up at the request of members of the town council.
I remember that. Yes.
They had
Yes.
asked as one of the conditions that the nonprofit get set up
Yes.
to demonstrate that we would be in a position to actually raise
I think it
funds.
went beyond asking. It seems to me there was a mandate that if you wanted this to continue,
Well,
you
these are my neighbors.
you
I'm
will
trying to be
therefore
polite.
do that. Yeah.
I don't know if there was an official vote or not, but so
Well,
at any
I can
rate,
shoot my mouth off more than you can.
Well,
You're
my
more
underst-
diplomatic.
My
I can just,
understanding is that it was to facilitate the fundraising. I mean,
Yes.
towns
Definitely
are
fundraising.
charitable,
Yes.
and any
Yeah.
contributions
Yeah.
to the town would be tax deductible. But I think there was still this kind of confusion or
Yeah.
disagreement, whatever it was, about whether it was a town project or a private project. And so I think the idea of creating a nonprofit was to have a private entity facilitating the fundraising that would manage,
And of course,
manage the
legally,
money.
it'd have
basically.
to be really a nonprofit if you wanted people to write checks.
Right, if it wasn't the town, it would have
Yeah.
to be a nonprofit, to have it be tax deductible.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we understood it as the
I think-
fundraising aspect, and you're right. We've always said we envision the group as being actively involved in promoting the park, doing
Yeah.
events at the park,
Yeah.
doing fundraising, having volunteers come in to, offset what would otherwise be costs for cleanup and other events. There's models for doing that in other communities. We've researched them not
Yeah, I
only
know
in New
you
Hampshire
researched
but
a lot
all
of- I
you know,
know-
all
I
over the
know you
country.
did, yeah.
It actually supports one of our goals for the park itself, which I think I'll add into this portion of the conversation because I think it's really
course.
important. Most people assume dog parks for dogs. I say dog parks for people. It's a community resource. It's a place where people with common interest, dogs, have an opportunity to get together and talk, and they're members of the community, and they'll talk about their dogs, and you know what? They'll talk about what's going on with the school board budget, and they'll talk
Oh, I
about
have a
other
son
things.
who goes to a dog park, several times a week.
There you go. Okay, so there's, we see that when we talk to the organizations that run other dog parks, to Parks and Rec in Florida, to people in Colorado. I've gone in and participated in a number of these just to see how they operate, and I really think of it as a substantial community resource, a place for the community to get together. It's also good in other ways for the dogs, which is
Sure.
obviously.
Sure.
I have gotten the question from time to time. Most people in town, not everybody, I like to point out, have a fair amount of property. Right?
Yeah.
So why can't the dogs exercise on the property? Well, it's not just about exercise. It is exercise, but
Well, socialization, too.
socialization. Socialization is excellent for dogs and
absolutely.
for people.
Yeah.
The better the
Yeah,
dog.
dogs love to see other dogs.
Dogs love to see other dogs,
They do.
and frankly, the more they're exercised and the more they learn proper social behavior with dogs and other people, the better they're going to be in the community.
Yeah,
We
absolutely,
teach our children good manners. We need to teach. I'm a strong believer. We have to teach our dogs good manners.
Sure.
I think I mentioned to you that I participate in training.
I know,
guiding eye dogs.
and then I remember seeing your name in the paper for that and kind of wasn't making that connection. I know. And for those of you who ever want to know more about that, this would be the guy to talk to because he does train seeing eye dogs, which is a phenomenal public service.
There are several people in town that are a member
I
of that
know,
organization.
I know.
Yes, yeah, and
And
so you
that-
may
that's
see
phenomenal.
us. So I'll divert for 10 seconds. You may see us occasionally with our dogs, even in a grocery store.
Yep.
We are socializing them, not to touch, not
Yeah,
to smell,
yeah.
and how to walk alongside a grocery cart.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to those dogs, training them.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's phenomenal work.
Yes. So the last step in the history, I think, would be that at the previous discussion about the dog park with the town council, it was voiced by the majority of members, as I recall,
Of the council?
Of the
or
town council,
Okay.
town council, that there was an interest in hearing more from the public, and they would like to see it as on the ballot as a question.
This
You know,
was like, what, a few months back?
a few months back,
Yeah,
yep, that's right.
okay.
And so we took that up, and that was the, as I reminded the council last night, that is why we're bringing this forward. It was
Okay.
essentially at their suggestion that we...
So then there's no reason that they would be surprised by the petition you presented them.
That's right.
This didn't just come out of the blue?
Ignoring the exact words, that was
Well, yeah,
acknowledged.
the wording,
That
yeah,
was
yeah.
acknowledged last night,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe differ a little bit on the history, and that's where it overlaps with my arrival and input. And I own a dog. I've been to dog parks. My sister lives near one
I
in
tried to
Tucson.
get
I
you to
take her
bring the
dog.
dog
I
today.
know. You wanted me to bring my
I
little
did. I
star
thought it
of
would
the
be
show.
fun. We could have him right here. Her right here.
I approach this this whole subject as town manager in a town where our resources are stretched thin, and if we do look at increasing our obligations to the public, we really wanted it to be something that either we knew the council or the public completely supported, and kind of went in with eyes open that this was a commitment by the town. When I got here and saw that this issue had been open for a number of years, to me it was kind of a pretty straightforward decision. Either it's got to be a town project, even if the funds are fundraised, which would be great because it would reduce our costs, but even if the funds are fundraised, it would still be a commitment of staff time. At the kind of
it's on
worst
town
case
property as
scenario
well.
is it would
Yeah.
be town maintenance staff, public works staff. If we're managing the funds, it would be finance staff. If something goes wrong, it would be public works supervisor, potentially me, parks and rec. So there was the potential to have quite a bit of staff involvement. Even if those costs were offset by funds, it still took away from other duties that we felt like were more important than a dog park. So that's the position I came into. The second prong of my concern was liability. Towns are covered by state statutes for immunity for parks and trails for which they don't charge. So just to have open parks, open trails, it's encouraged under state law, and to that extent, state law says the town shall be immune from lawsuits or whatever, not to prevent anybody from suing, but provides statutory immunity. Once we started introducing another entity with obligations, it clouded the immunity both for the town and for that entity, which is why we said if it's going to be managed by a third party, it had to be under the form of the lease like we do with our other properties. So it wasn't necessarily that we were worried about liability if it was a town park. We were worried about liability if it was a town park with another group that had some kind of responsibility that was informal. So it's really nuanced, but that's when I came in, my decision was it either has to be a town park that we all agree is going to sap some resources, even if we have a fundraising offset, or it needs to be a lease. Or I said at the time, or you can bring a petition to town meeting. So I don't think the council necessarily said, go off and bring us a petition, we want to know what the public said. I think it was me that said, either we accept it as a town park, or you do a lease, or you get town meeting to tell us ultimately what they want. And so that was really how we came around to it, in my memory. But that's neither here nor there. I think the council is glad in a way that this could be resolved in March when we have the voter input. But that's
now,
primary.
when this goes on the ballot, and I know we're going to talk about exactly what the wording is and everything,
Sure.
so people will understand it.
Yep.
When this actually is voted upon, say for instance there's overwhelming yes, we want a dog park in town.
Right.
Is the council now bound to go forward, or is it a binding question?
My response to that is politically yes, legally no. The even budgetary town meeting can't bind the council on how it spends the money within the approved budget.
It still allows them discretion?
It allows them discretion. Okay. This started as an initiative petition under the charter. The charter requires the initiative petition to raise a question or direct a question to the council, and then the charter says that the council could either approve, amend, or deny the measure that's brought to them.
So
this
then,
case-
even if it passes, the council can say,
Well-
okay, the people want it, but
So there are
and
two.
make
No.
changes?
So what I'm talking about is the question that was brought to the council that was heard last night.
Right.
The council essentially, in a way, denied both of those questions that were petitioned to which the first one was approve the construction of a dog park using privately raised funds. They ultimately denied that as being moot. That is what they had approved a year ago. The issue isn't whether they support the construction. The issue is really how do we manage it for the long term.
Right,
The second
okay.
question that the initiative petition brought was to put the first question on the ballot. In a sense, the council denied that also because they wrote their own question, which the charter allows the council to bring its own question to the voters.
And this would be the three-part
And so this is what they
question.
brought. Yeah,
Okay.
there are two. It's two questions. One of them has three answers, and Fred actually brought it with him, which was
Good.
which is thank you. So
Because I think sometimes
just to answer
I
your
think that three-part thing could be a little confusing.
it could be a
to
little
people,
confusing,
yeah.
but ultimately, I think it's unlikely that if the voters overwhelmingly support the dog park through the ballot questions, that the council would go against this. Because ultimately, what we really wanted to have an idea is how popular is this? How much do the residents of Bedford want this to happen, or is it a small group of people who've been on a committee all along and are passionate about it? Do they represent a couple hundred, a couple thousand? Where's really the momentum in town, and
Now,
that's what we're
let me ask
getting
you
at.
this now that you brought that up. How come, and now I'll play devil's advocate a little bit, I think on both sides, how come this is kind of happening with the dog park? And I might be wrong, but I don't remember ever voting on the Bedford Village Common project, for example, or on the Stephen Buswell School.
Yeah.
So why, I guess my question would be is like, if I didn't live in Bedford and was just looking at it, I guess I'd say, well, why are the dog park folks, advocates being held to, would appear a different standard
Well, I think
than
it's
some of the other small groups in town who weren't really asked to prove
I think it
that their
actually.
support went any bigger than those group of 10 or 12 people
I
who were the
think the
advocates.
Stevens Buswell School I can answer pretty quickly. They agreed to a lease. So I think if the
Right,
the nonprofit organization
but the park,
had
the
agreed.
park people didn't
The
agree
park
to
people
lease.
is a different story. That my understanding is that goes back to the master plan in 1980 or something that identified the desire
Yeah, but
for
nobody
a
cared
public
until
park.
a certain group of private citizens kind of banded together
Yeah,
and
well, but-
decided it was going to be their project.
But openly with council support and Parks and Rec support from the very beginning. And so I think
yeah or no.
no,
I mean, the council wasn't willing to ante up the money for it.
the town did. The town
Well, I mean,
gave-
not all of it. You
No,
know,
right,
those
not all of
people
it.
were charged with
absolutely.
raising money.
Yeah, but the town did contribute recreation fees, impact
Yeah,
fees
I know.
towards
Oh,
it.
yeah,
So
I know they did.
I think the
Which-
difference is
Which
the-
some of us weren't thrilled about that, to be honest with you.
But I
you
think
know?
the difference is that the council, the town leadership at the time said this is a priority that we are supportive of. And if that had been their position of the dog park, and I'm not talking about a couple of councilors or a subcommittee, I'm saying if the council, the majority of the councils had said this is an initiative that we think is appropriate, I think the outcome would have potentially been different. But there is enough concern about dedicating town staff to this project that didn't exist with the Bedford Village Common. The council's behind the initiative. They see the benefit of dedicating the town staff to that project on an ongoing basis. With the dog park, it wasn't there. And that's really the biggest difference, is that it's kind of whether it gets to the underlying values of the council or
Yeah, well,
whatever.
I mean,
It's-
I'm just
yeah.
questioning, if everything's 100% fair, And kind of on that same vein, now, the big bone of contention with this whole lease is that the council's not satisfied, obviously, with and I think this is a fair description, with the promise of the nonprofit
Right.
group to
Right.
continue to raise money and do maintenance.
Yeah.
I mean, Chairman Dermody several times last night said, well, what if in 3 years they all get bored with it and don't want to
Right.
do it anymore? Where does that leave us?
Yep.
So we need a lease. And I understand that point of view. I'm not debating the
Yep.
point of view.
Right.
However, you've got a lease with the cross-country ski folk for Legacy Park. You do have a lease with Stephen Buswell. You don't have a lease with the Bedford Village Common because of the fact that the
town has said it's town park.
initiative.
Right.
You have a lease with CastleHill, which may or may not continue because of a bunch of controversies.
Correct.
But in each of the cases that I mentioned, it doesn't seem as though where there were leases that the groups, the supporting nonprofit groups, are being held to the same standard as again, that is going to be inflicted on the dog park people, because in each one of those cases, if I'm not mistaken, there are town resources and manpower that have been and will continue to be devoted to each one of those projects. And yet there seems to be kind of a lot of fussing and fuming on whether or not any of this will also be devoted to the dog park. And I guess that's where I'm kind of disconnecting. Like,
Sure.
you know, and I mean, the dog park is certainly a whole lot smaller with less needs than will be the future needs of Stephen Buswell School, the Common, the cross-country Legacy Park area, or CastleHill Farm. I mean, they're talking...
Let me be really, really clear.
Yeah.
A lease of town property doesn't get the town out of the picture.
No, I
It
understand
doesn't.
that.
The town is always
understand that.
ultimately responsible for the use of its property.
I understand.
Whether it's the ski club or
One way or
CastleHill Farm,
another,
whatever it
absolutely.
is,
Bottom
the town.
line, yeah.
So you're not mistaken. Even if there's a lease in place, there's town involvement, there's town oversight. We would be remiss to say, okay, lease,
of
you're on
course.
your own. It's
Of
still
course.
our property, and a lease holds both parties accountable. A good lease, and we don't have good leases in all cases, but a good lease makes it really clear what both parties are responsible for. Bedford Village Common, from the outset, was embraced as a town park. My understanding is that, yes, there's a private fundraising component, but the long-term plan had always been that would become a town park. And I think we treated the dog park the same way, because we said, if the town wants this to be a town park, we will treat it as a town park. But the breakdown was that there was really never any clear commitment that the town wanted this to be a town park. They are town parks in other communities, and a lot of that is to get around the liability issue. Dairy, which I think was brought up, was started by a nonprofit organization on town property. It is still funded to some extent, not all extent, but to some extent by fundraising activities. There is town manpower there, and the community knows that, and that's okay. I mean, if that's what the community wants, that's what we'll do. But unlike the Bedford Village Common, it was not and I know Fred will disagree with this, but it was not a town initiative from the first place. My understanding about how this came about was it started with a couple of people talking about it. The council said, well, let's form a committee to go study the feasibility of it. And in history, that's been relabeled as the council formed a committee to bring a dog park. No, the council formed a committee, or had the rec department form a committee to study the feasibility of it, with the understanding that we would be talking about whether there should be one or not that it was a foregone conclusion that the council was behind it. But I just want to be really clear that even if there's a lease, it doesn't mean the town's not going to be involved in oversight. I mean, Stevens, Buswell,
No, I
they're
understand. It just
very
seems though as
independent.
there are stricter standards being thrown at them.
I don't
than
think
at
so. I
some of
think
the other
actually what we're
groups.
trying to do is have the same standard applied if it is a private organization. If it's embraced as a public project, then we would apply the same standards that we do have for Bedford Village.
Well,
Common.
maybe what
right
leads
now
me
it's
to
in
that,
between.
and I'll just finish this thought. You know,
Okay.
maybe what leads me to that is I keep hearing from the council that the dog park is a want, not a need. And I won't debate that. It is a want. Is it 100% necessary to town government? Probably not. However, Bedford Village Common, the Stephen Buswell School, the cross-country ski area, and CastleHill Farm were all wants too.
Right.
They're not needs.
And they're all subject.
They have nothing to do with why I choose to live in Bedford
Right.
or anything else.
Right. And they're all subject to leases, Kathy. So
Not all of them.
I think you're kind of proving my point.
Well,
They are. I mean, the cross-country ski
well,
area.
yeah, but I mean, there doesn't seem to have been, and again, maybe I'm totally wrong, but I mean, everything I was hearing last night, there seems to be a lot more emphasis on whether Friends of Canine Corner at some point in time will have enough or get bored or run out of money or whatever
Right,
in the future. That there didn't seem to be that emphasis or questioning of the Educational Farm at Joppa Hill, the Bedford Historical Society, the Bedford Cross Country Ski Club, or for that matter, even the Friends of the, whichever they call themselves, the Friends of the Bedford Village Common, who has taken on some of the responsibility for continuing construction of the park and amenities that will go to the park.
So let me address.
It just seems as though they're getting nailed more than other
Bedford
groups.
Village Common, Kathy, there has always been the understanding that once the fundraising and the construction is done, the town will take on the maintenance after that. So from the outset, town park, council
But I don't think the common is a need.
No, I understand.
It's a want.
But that's your council that or councils along the way that did that. Stevens Buswell School, the lease contains the requirement that they have the funds in place for every step of the way, that they had a
For
business
construction
plan.
and so on.
So that they had a business plan, that they've got to be sustainable. So I think
But
we're
the
being
town is
consistent.
going to help with maintenance and so on, is it not?
Nope.
Nothing? Even though the town owns
Only
the building?
oversight of the lease, correct. With Educational Farm at Joppa Hill, to
But what
be
if-
sure,
what if the Historical
if
Society
you
falls
would
apart,
let
it
me
doesn't raise the
finish,
money?
that would be great. Since you
All right.
asked the question, I'm trying
right.
to answer. Educational Farm at Joppa Hill, to be sure, we wish that the lease contained a provision requiring ongoing funding. In fact, that's in the agreement that has failed to be signed.
I know.
It's
A
in
problem.
there. And the cross-country ski is responsible for its own costs. It's responsible for the lighting when it's occupied, unlike any of the other organizations that use our playing fields. They are not required to pay for the lighting. There's a good working relationship with those other nonprofit organizations that contribute when they have some improvement that they want to make to the fields. Otherwise, the town does maintain them, or the school maintains them, depending on who owns the fields.
Okay.
So I think that we actually are trying to be consistent with respect to the dog park. Either we embrace it as a public park, in which case it would fall in line with the Bedford Village Common,
Okay.
or we embrace it as a lease, in which case it would fall in line with those other organizations. What I'm saying I'm not willing to accept is some sort of hybrid that uses staff time without commitment from the town, that creates a muddy area for liability, which is not only good for the
And that
town,
has
but it's
to be a
not good
concern
for the
anyways.
nonprofit
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
So,
No argument there.
so I think we're very clear that it fits into one of those two categories, and we want the voters to tell us if they want it to be a public park or not, and
All right.
and then
Fair
we'll be
enough.
clear.
So, all right, having heard all that now, okay,
you're
and
gonna-
that's the town's position. Let's go back to you. How do you folks feel?
You're going to be surprised.
Well, no, I don't think I'll be
You're going to be
surprised. I want to
surprised.
draw
I
it
actually,
out.
I don't disagree with Jessie.
Anything she said. Okay.
Oh, well, there may be a few little items, but
Well, that's
you
what
know,
I wanna
on
hear,
the major
because
on the
people need to know.
on the major points, I don't really disagree.
Okay.
We agree that Jessie called the right question.
Okay.
And
No,
in
fine.
fact, I
Yeah, I
will
agree.
say at her very first town council meeting
Mm-hmm.
in the town of Bedford, she called the right question.
Yeah.
She pretty much, as she stated here, is this a town park? Is it not?
Yeah, yeah.
Does the town council support creating a town park or not?
Mm-hmm.
The town council didn't support. They didn't state it one way or the other. They actually threw it in her lap and said, "It's your decision."
I agree with you on that.
And
I think
why
they threw
they-
a lot of things in
and,
this
you know,
woman's
That's what
lap.
I'm here for.
Speaking as a citizen of Bedford,
Mm-hmm.
how is whether or not we have a park the decision of a town manager?
Mm-hmm.
That our elected officials are supposed to represent us. Now, if they weren't
Absolutely
sure
right.
what the answer to that was, that's quite possible. But I don't understand throwing it into Jessie's lap. Jessie has not complained to me about that, but I'll speak.
No, I know. She doesn't
I think that
complain
was
about
unfair.
anything. She
No.
handles it. No,
No,
I know.
she does.
know.
I think that was unfair to throw that in her lap, because how could she possibly decide whether or not the citizens of Bedford wanted a
I
town park?
totally agree.
So I think.
And I wasn't coming against you on that.
No, that's
I'm
fine.
trying to draw out the town's position
So
and so on.
I think calling the question as to whether or not the town is going to have a town park is the right question. The question really that we were trying to get before the town, which essentially this what's going to be on the ballot calls for, is do you want a dog park, knowing that that it's not going to be built unless funds, private funds, are made available to do it.
Maybe this would be the time to actually, so people know what we're all talking about, what they are going to read on the ballot. You want to do?
Sure.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Oh, yeah.
May
I
I
think-
make
yeah.
one other point before we do that?
Absolutely,
Okay. There was a lot of discussion, as you pointed out last night, related to how do
two
I know
hours
these
and
people are
something,
going to be here? How do I know? Because we have offered to do continuing fundraising
I know you
for
have.
ongoing maintenance and services. The question was raised several times, how do we know they're going to be there? Well, you know, I like simple facts, and simple facts is you don't.
Right.
Right? You could do a contract. If you sign a contract for somebody
Doesn't mean
to
somebody won't break
build
it.
build an extension to your house, they could die tomorrow. A town can contract with somebody, they may go out of business the day after.
And even a lease doesn't mean they're going to be able to
no,
get
that's
around to it.
that's exactly right.
As we kind of
That's exactly
found
right.
out.
I'm a businessman. I've been in business for more than 30 years. And what do you look for? You look for the things that are the confidence points. If we raised the $70,000 or more that are necessary to build a park, that's the best proof that there's interest in the community that this can continue. Whether or not
And it was proof for the other groups.
exactly
The people did commit to do that.
exactly
Right, they did.
Right.
that to me is the proof. That's the proof.
Yeah.
You know, we've gone so far as to say, you know, our plans would be that we would build in several years worth of maintenance funds as a reserve account, with the logic being that if somehow we weren't doing our duty and continuing to raise funds, you'd have 3 years notice.
Okay.
And the town could do whatever it's going to decide to do, which they always maintain the ability to do in
Up
the way
to
that
and
we're
including
suggesting.
it someday,
Closing it,
if they had
or
to, yeah.
funding it, or
Obviously.
asking another group to be formed, or asking the group to reinvigorate itself, or whatever it would happen to be. But you don't know that, you don't know that any other group in town or anyone that you contract with in your private life or in business life is going to be there.
No, you
Right?
don't.
So, I bought a Saturn. They went out of business.
Yeah.
You admit that?
Yeah.
No, and one of the concerns I think the council had, and I appreciate the compliments you've paid me, but I do think it's difficult for it. The council had stated what it thought its core services were. The dog park really doesn't fit into its core services. Yet you've got a vocal, involved
True. I
group
think
who
we all
wants
agree
it.
on that.
So
yeah.
I think I think the council really hadn't really been asked a yes or no question. Do we want a dog park or not? And there being or do we want a town dog park or not? And there being the opportunity as we approach town meeting to take it to the voters, I think is a good kind of out in a way to get a broader perspective, because as large as Bedford is, it's really not a very engaged community unless somebody really is passionate about a subject. You see those people.
You've noticed
you
that,
really
huh?
don't see the silent, whether it's a majority or minority. You just this is the best way to get the answer to that question. And I forget what else I was going to say, but
It'll occur to you.
yeah.
Yeah.
As far as the money not being available, I think if the voters end up approving the ballot questions, which we will talk about, if eventually the money does dry up because people have changed or interest has changed, whatever it is, we will know, I think, by the time that happens, whether this is a popular park that the citizenry think is important, that should get folded into the budget, or whether there are 5 people a day and we close it down and it really won't be missed. I mean, we'll know at the point that if that does happen, we'll have a better idea about how popular it is overall.
Well,
but do you mind if we read that?
Yeah, because I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking we've had our good go-round on philosophical
Do you want to go ahead, Fred?
differences.
Do you want me to read it? Okay.
What we need to do is let the public know
That's
what
right.
the ballot's about and all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, this isn't my wording, but it's
There is a preamble, and then there are basically 2 questions.
Yeah,
That's
you want
correct.
to might as well read the whole
Yeah,
thing. It's
go
not
for
that
it.
it's
Yep.
too long.
Right.
In fact, maybe we can actually, maybe at the end of the show, assuming we don't go overtime, which we do often, might even be able to get it on the screen. But otherwise,
And we'll
people
put it
can
up on our
certainly
website.
get your,
Yeah.
it'll be on the town's website.
Right.
Go for it.
Okay. On January 25th, 2012, the Bedford Town Council approved the use of town-owned parcel of land on Nashville Road for the construction of a dog park. The Friends of Bedford Canine Corner, slightly the wrong name, but that's going to be corrected, a private nonprofit organization, has committed to privately funding the entire construction of the dog park. On January 22nd, 2013, a citizen's petition was delivered to the Town Council asking to construct the dog park with privately raised funds, but failing to address the question who will operate and maintain the dog park. Town maintenance of the dog park may require contract support due to town employee workload, providing core services. At the present time, there is no organization willing to commit to a lease requirement. However, there may be an organization that would come forward to do so. 1. Are you in favor of the construction of a dog park on Nashua Road in Bedford with the cost of construction fully funded in advance by a private citizens group? Yes or no? 2, and this is where it gets confusing, if a dog park is constructed on Nashua Road using privately raised funds, select 1. It's listed as ABC, and I
think
understand
it will be that on
it
the
will
ballot,
be ABC.
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's the way it will appear?
Yep.
Yeah. The town of Bedford should, the town of Bedford should operate and maintain the dog park with funds included in the annual town operating budget, taxpayer funded. B, the town of Bedford should operate and maintain the dog park provided that the funds are raised privately for all continuing and future costs, privately funded. C, the dog park should only be privately funded, operated, and maintained, subject to a lease with the town, privately funded, operated, and maintained. And if I can just add my own comment to that, we were not given the opportunity to give feedback, although this was discussed during the meeting.
Oh, you mean during the council
during the
discussion?
council meeting?
Yeah, I know,
after
yeah.
when they were discussing, we hadn't seen this until after public discussion was closed.
Okay.
But if you choose to vote yes that you want a dog park, and you vote C that you want it only privately funded, operated, and maintained, I'll speak for myself, and I've been involved with this for a while.
Mm-hmm.
There is no other group. It's essentially if you vote yes and C, you don't get a dog park.
At this time, right. Right.
Yeah,
and I think the council's
can't-
aware of that. I mean, but the alternative before we added the lease was, do you want a dog park, yes or no, under question 1, and then question 2 had A, taxpayer funded, B, privately funded, or C, no park. And so the C, adding the lease provision, again, was more consistent with how we're treating the use of town land by other organizations. The Bedford Friends of Canine Corner may say, well, we don't want a lease, and we've been clear about that, and so we're out of the game. But but to me, it gets the question out to the public, and the council gets an answer. If the lease is the only way the citizens support it, it may be another group at some period of time. Who
Now,
knows?
that
At least
explanation that was in the preamble, though, correct? Not in the actual question.
Correct.
right.
That's correct.
But that will
And
be
I
preamble will be on the ballot.
It may be
But-
confusing
but-
to people.
Well, that's what
Yeah.
I'm wondering, because, a lot of people sometimes will read a bill summary and like, yeah, I understand, and then go and just do the yes or no.
Yeah.
I wonder if when, say, people look at C and think, well, that sounds reasonable, if they're really going to understand that that might mean the end of it. I mean, that's why I listened last night. I think there was some debate whether to put it in the preamble or
I
in the
think there will be
question.
some debate until it gets voted on. I mean, I think that Fred and his colleagues will do their publicity. We will do ours on what the true meaning of the lease part of that question is. And it sounds like we disagree. And
Well, you said the publicity. Councilor Bandazian last night kind of said that the burden was on you guys.
He did.
To do, and he called it a campaign, like a political campaign. And I kind of listened to that, and I thought, well, yeah, okay, but campaigns cost money and plans. So
Right.
how are you going to do that?
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. Of course, this is all new information from
Well,
last night,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
and if I can point out my perspective on the way the questions number 2 was phrased, it's kind of like, would you like a house that you have to go buy and pay for and maintain? That's A. Would you like a house that somebody else is going to pay for you, or would you like a house that someone else is going to pay for and maintain for
I think
you?
it might have raised Jesse's blood pressure a little bit on that one.
And to me, it's, well, without any other explanation, gee, I'd love everything for free. I mean, it's, when I go to the grocery store and it always asks on my credit
Yeah, I
card, do you
agree,
agree with this price? I always go, well, no, I'd like it lower.
right.
So at this point, the question is what it is. The town, it's almost, I feel like it is
Yeah,
what it is.
that's final, right? That is
That
final.
is
Yes,
it.
it is
That is
final.
it. It is what
Okay.
it is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
And I do think, my perspective, we will, Friends of Bedford Canine Corner are meeting tonight. We'll be discussing this, obviously, and my own perspective, I'll speak for myself right now, is that C is the equivalent of saying, I don't want a dog park.
Well, to some extent it is.
You
know, I mean, I think you even
Well, and I
understand
think
that,
the voters should have the ability to, if
Well, that's question one, though. Do you want a park or not? Right? And C is, it presents the opportunity for, I want a dog park, not really understanding that there really isn't, and there isn't likely to be someone coming forward to say that they're going to lease the property and
Right.
run the dog park.
right.
and there lies the rub, I guess.
That's the
Well,
rub.
but C is, you know, with all due respect, C is the voters basically saying we don't think the town should be involved in any way, shape, or form with a dog park. And if we only left A, it'll be taxpayer funds, or B, it'll be private funds, if you voted no, that you don't want a dog park, but then a subset or the same set says there's only A, taxpayer funds, or B, private funds, it doesn't, you could have actually a more confusing response out of the vote. You could have 1,500 out of 2,000 voters saying we don't want a park, and then the remaining 500 get to decide how it's paid for. So C is, you're right, it may be a nail in the coffin, but it also does give the voters to very clearly say, we don't think this is a need. The only way we think it should get done is under a lease, like the other organizations that are voluntary and kind of sustain, in theory, their own use of town property.
At any rate,
Can I ask
it
you
is.
a quick question?
Yes.
If C were to pass, which obviously would be to the great consternation of the people who support a dog park, if that's what the voters say,
Yep.
and we won't even get into whether they understood what they were voting for or not, whether they do or they don't, none of us will know. But say that vote comes back on the C part of it. As far as the council is concerned, are they going to say, okay, that's it? The voters have spoken and we're done? I mean, is that a possibility? Or
No,
do you
I
think
think-
there's
I think-
still some intent to...
I think that the council would likely wait for an organization to come forward that is interested in a lease. We're not going to go out and hunt for one.
Right. No, I
but
understand.
but I would say that really any town property, if there's a public benefit or a public purpose that could be served through a lease, then that's on the table kind of across the board. And I should mention that the Cross Country Ski Club, a lease didn't come about until after there were problems. That's when the town wished that it had had a lease in place.
And I understand
so
that.
that's-
And obviously there's been problems with the farm lease. I mean,
Right.
and a lot of people, I guess, on the council or so on may wish that had been a tighter lease
Right.
or something.
And
I don't know.
we're
I mean,
just
I don't
trying to
sit on
learn
the
from
inside meetings.
mistakes.
But you're absolutely right on the
Yeah.
cross-country thing.
Interesting that you say that.
The issue was much later, yeah.
I realize Jessie has a different opinion about this, but my point of view is we're actually handing the town more power, because the way that we're suggesting we go about doing
More
this.
power by what, this?
Without a lease.
Oh, okay.
If it's
Okay.
if it's a private organization providing
Gotcha.
funds to the town,
Right.
right? Then we're giving the town all authority to make all decisions. The town can make any decision they want about repurposing the land, about anything they want to do. It's within the town, and we think if the property's being used, it's active, the dog park's going to stay. But we've given up all rights to be able to, say, we have a lease with you, you can't take it away from us.
So lease or no lease, if the town says, you know what, we're going to build a road there, see you later dog park, that's it.
They will
Because
have.
the town still owns the
they
land.
will-
They still have eminent domain.
Well, I
and all
could,
that.
Well,
I can
yeah.
assure you I will not be willing to sign a lease that doesn't retain power for the town, so
Right, but I'm simply
I don't
saying-
think we're going to give it up one way or the other.
Right, but I would simply saying if we're making an investment or improvement of
So
the
you
property,
stand for
no, right, that's your negotiating position.
That's
And I
right.
would say if we're going to make a substantial investment in the property, we're going to ask for something.
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
Okay,
no.
Right.
So
Right.
I've expressed my concerns about the way it's worded. It is what it is. All right, so it's almost like it is what it is. I need to live with it. And I think it's going to be. I think you're right. I don't know how I'm going to do it. The committee hasn't met yet, but I think we have to make clear what we think our opinion is. And
And that's hard to do sometimes. I mean, it's like anything else. If you're totally at the mercy of, for instance, the newspapers, giving you some stories, articles, or free notices or whatever, you're at their mercy. They
That's
might, they might not.
Right.
You know, I mean, it all depends what they're
That's right.
publishing that day. I mean, we go through this all the time when we're going to have a show that we think the public should see. Most of the time, they ignore the press release. You know,
No, I think that's the hardest part of
it
what
is.
we
It's
do as
very
public
hard.
officials is trying to
Yeah.
get information out there that
Yeah, it's very
you know
hard.
that is understandable, that's straightforward, that doesn't
Yeah.
you know, that just tries to explain why we make the decisions we make. And,
Yeah.
and I think any voters, you're going to have people who have done all of the research and know exactly what every, you know, word means, and you're going to have people who don't really know until they get in there and read it.
And they're
so
probably
it's,
the majority.
it's on, you know, it's my job and Fred's job to get the word out on this. So.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you're,
'cause
I thank you for the
I think
opportunity.
the town has
to
a
do that.
little more opportunity because, you know, if you call a press conference or whatever, they're going to show up.
I'm not going to call a press
No, I
conference
know,
on
but
that.
I mean, that's just an example.
But yes,
you know what I mean?
great.
You know, the town does have a little more of an inherent ability to
Right.
get some media coverage. You know, maybe you guys are the only way you're going to get it is if you pay for it with ads or whatever, which of course gives you a whole new
Yeah,
set
no,
of
I
problems
think,
to
I
deal
mean,
with.
based on my conversations with the media, I think they want both sides, if you will. I think they're
Yeah, I hope so.
interested in helping us bring a good, you know,
Yeah, I
good
hope
open
so.
picture.
You know, I honestly don't think at this point, you know, history aside, at
Mm-hmm.
this point, we're really not in substantial disagreement.
Yeah, the only battle
That's right.
seems to be over the lease. I mean,
Yeah,
at least
well,
from,
we're-
from what I'm looking
even
at.
but
you know?
even on that, we're really in agreement that it's appropriate to ask the community for feedback,
Mm-hmm.
right, in a substantial way, and that this is the appropriate substantial way. I have a little
Okay.
concern over the wording, but the general approach, I think it's, you know, if the community were to come back and say no, I'd rather know that now. I don't believe that's what's going to happen.
Okay.
All the feedback I get from everyone I discuss it with, including people who are generally don't care, you know, the feedback I get from people who generally don't care are, well, it's a free dog park. It does provide value to the community. If it's free, so what? Now, again, as Jessie points out, if I call her and she picks up the phone,
Yep.
her time's not
She'll
free.
pick it up.
Her time's not free. No, of course, but
She's
I'm
good
just
that
saying,
way.
her time's not free. It's going
Right.
to use.
Of course.
Right, but you know, if citizens are coming forward to pay the initial construction and creation of the dog park, that's a pretty substantial gift. That's like turning down a free horse.
Okay, well, I'm going to put you to the test, pretending now that you are paying for advertising time, all right? We are almost out of time, so I'm going to put you to the test that I own the radio station, and I'm giving each of you 30 seconds to do your PSA. Who wants to go first?
Ladies first.
Okay.
Go for it.
Well, I would say, first and foremost, I hope voters come out both to the town meeting and to the elections and make their voices heard across the board, because ultimately, you know, the town of Bedford wants to do what the citizens want us to do. The dog park has not ranked at high on the list of what I believe are priorities for the town to focus on right now. We've been looking very carefully at our staffing and operations, and this did not, you know, didn't rise to the top. However, if the public thinks it's a priority, we will do whatever the voters ask us to do.
Good job. Okay, make it snappy.
And you know, I
Do it.
always like always, I like Jessie's summations. I think they're fair questions, and I do think that a dog park will be of value to the community. As I mentioned, a dog park is where people get together. It's where we create community. It's good for the dogs, and in fact, it adds, as I understand from real estate brokers, it's considered an asset and an additional reason to move into the community.
Good job to you as well.
Thank you.
Jesse, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for
Thank
putting up
you.
with the devil's advocate questions.
Always happy to do it.
And thank you for putting
And
up
thank
with
you,
the devil's
Jessie.
advocate. They shook hands. I didn't need to pull out the towels, everybody. Well, there you have it. We're at the end of the dog park issue for at least right now. Don't forget to vote. You heard two people tell it like it is. That's what this is about. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye till next time.